The birth of Prohibition 1920-193 in the early 20th century, a wave of moral reform swept across America. Alcohol was seen as the root of all evil, fueling crime, poverty, and broken families. The result? The 18th Amendment and the Volstead Act, marking the start of prohibition in 1920. But instead of ending alcohol consumption, it drove it underground. Speakeasies flourished, organized crime boomed, and enforcement became a nightmare. By 1933, America had had enough. The 21st Amendment repealed prohibition, the first and only time a constitutional amendment was reversed. The war on drugs begins 1970. Fast forward to the 1970, as President Nixon declared drug abuse public enemy number one. This was the beginning of the war on drugs. The Controlled Substances Act classified drugs into schedules, with marijuana landing in the strictest category, Schedule 1, alongside heroin and LSD. What followed was decades of mass incarceration, especially targeting minority communities. Drug policy became a tool not just of health policy but of political and social control. Crackdown in controversy 1900s 1990s, two strikes, and the war intensified. Just say no became a national slogan. Mandatory minimums, three strikes laws, and zero tolerance policies filled prisons with non-violent drug offenders. But cracks were beginning to show. Studies revealed that enforcement was racially biased. Meanwhile, the opioid crisis was quietly building among suburban and rural white communities. Marijuana's redemption 2000s, 2010s. Then came a seismic shift. In the 2000s, states began legalizing medical marijuana, California leading the way in 1996. Public opinion started to turn. By the 2010s, recreational use became legal in states like Colorado and Washington. Cannabis was now being taxed, regulated, and sold in sleek dispensaries. What was once demonized was now a booming industry. From criminalization to decriminalization, other substances soon entered the conversation. Oregon decriminalized small amounts of all drugs in 2020. Cities like Denver and Oakland began decriminalizing psychedelics like psilocybin mushrooms. This wasn't about encouraging drug use, it was about recognizing addiction as a health issue, not a crime. Harm reduction replaced punishment as the new philosophy. The ongoing opioid crisis yet, while some substances are being decriminalized, others are wreaking havoc. Fentanyl, a synthetic opioid, has caused an explosion in overdose deaths. Unlike past drug waves, this crisis has forced policymakers to rethink everything. Even conservative states are now expanding access to treatment and overdose prevention tools like Narcan. What's next? American stance on substances is still evolving. Psychedelic-assisted therapy is being researched for PTSD and depression. Cannabis is federally illegal but legal in most states. Some call for full decriminalization, others warn of unintended consequences. One thing is clear, substance policy is no longer just about law enforcement. It's about public health, racial justice, economics, and freedom. Economic impact of legalization legal cannabis is big business. In 2024 alone, the industry was worth over $35 billion. 0 cents. States earned millions in tax revenue, creating jobs and funding schools and healthcare. VOQ, Q of cannabis conferences, retail shops, tax graphs. But critics argue that legalization favors wealthy investors while communities harmed by the drug war are left out. The racial roots of drug laws. Many of America's earliest drug laws were rooted not in health concerns but in racial fears. VOQ, historical newspaper clippings, anti-drug propaganda featuring racist caricatures in rabbinic prose. In the early 1900s, opium laws targeted Chinese immigrants in San Francisco. Cocaine crackdowns were aimed at black laborers in the South. Marijuana bans were linked to anti-Mexican sentiment during the Great Depression. The medical community's shift. For decades, doctors were complicit or silent when it came to drug criminalization. But the tide is turning. Harm reduction, medication-assisted treatment, safe injection sites, decriminalization for public health. Personal stories from the drug war. Eric, 19, was sentenced to 10 years for carrying a small amount of crack cocaine. Maria, a single mother, lost her children due to a marijuana arrest. James, a veteran, found peace through psychedelic assisted therapy after years of PTSD. From booze to bust, the birth of the drug war. When alcohol was re-legalized, authorities needed a new target. Enter the drug war. In 1971, President Nixon officially declared drugs public enemy number one. But internal memos later revealed the real strategy. Use drug laws to silence black leaders and anti-war activists. It worked. Raids increased, incarceration soared, and marijuana, despite its mild effects, was painted as dangerous as heroin. The 1980s crackdown prison nation under President Reagan, the war intensified. The just say no era began, but what was being said yes to? Mandatory minimums for drug offenses 101, sentencing disparity for crack versus powder cocaine, zero tolerance in schools, housing, and jobs, a turning tide, medical marijuana, and public pushback. In the 1990s, the tide began to shift. California legalized medical marijuana. Activists, patients, and doctors began asking tough questions. The hypericity of legalization. Legalization didn't mean justice. It meant profit. Wealthy investors launched dispensaries. Politicians who once opposed weed now invested in it. Meanwhile, thousands still sat in prison for past marijuana convictions. Mental health. In a surprising twist, America is now embracing substances it once feared most. Psychedelics. Clinical trials show promise for MDMA for PTSD, psilocybin for depression, ketamine for anxiety and suicidal thoughts. What America learned or didn't: that prohibition often causes more harm than good, that criminalizing addiction destroys lives but doesn't stop usage, that policy driven by fear leads to mass incarceration, that legalization without justice is incomplete, that science, compassion, and reform are possible, that healing can come not from war but from understanding. How the internet wielded war on drugs. In the 2000s, a new battlefield emerged. The internet. Forums and Reddit threads began sharing harm reduction info. Trip reports replaced scare tactics. Underground chemists created synthetic drugs faster than laws could respond. Silk Road allowed anonymous buying and selling of drugs through crypto. America's drug policy in geometrical context. Portugal decriminalized all drugs. Overdoses plummeted. Uruguay, first country to fully legalize cannabis. Canada, legal weed and pilot programs for safe opioid use. Thailand, recently decriminalized cannabis and is testing reforms. Race, drugs, and systemic inequality. Black Americans are 4 times more likely to be arrested for marijuana despite similar usage rates. If you enjoyed this video and it gave you something to think about, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.